This podcast is brought to you by Bonus Room Productions and We Own This Town.
I am Jason T. Mears, Esquire.
And I'm Kelly Hoyle-Bullard.
And we are Send Dimas Today. How's it going, Kelly?
Hey, JT, it's going amazing.
What?
It's going incredible. Do you know what just happened this past week?
I do, but why don't you tell me anyway, because I love hearing it.
Oh, man. It was the 30th anniversary of one of our favorite movies of all time that maybe we talk about on this podcast.
Yeah.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, 30 years old.
We made it, everybody.
Which means we are 40 years old.
We are so old. We are so old. Oh, I have a wife, kids, and a mortgage.
Yep.
You're
doing great, though.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks. You're doing great, too.
Hey, thank you. Thank you.
You're doing great. So I am incredibly stoked for this show.
Yeah.
Have I been more stoked for another show? Maybe. I mean, we've talked to some great people.
Yeah,
right?
But this was a special one for you, my friend. We made one of Jason's dreams come true. We got to interview Evan Dorkin, and Evan Dorkin is one of Jason's favorite. What's the proper term here? Comic illustrator and author.
Yeah,
does that do it justice there?
Yeah. Great artist, great writer. He's been writing a lot more lately. So anyway, this huge name in indie comics. He responsible for Milk and Cheese, Dork. Why we interviewed him? He did the Marvel adaptation of the Bogus Journey script, and then did 11 of 12 issues of the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure comics, which was published by Marvel, and you can go out and get reprints of them. You can find on Amazon. You absolutely got to do it. Art is great. His take on the characters is so cool. This interview was amazing. We got this incredible perspective of the comics industry at that time, what it was like to work at, and then also his time working with the guys over at Adult Swim. Mm-hmm. This guy was on Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
Yeah. Offers some thoughts on Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. So strap in, everybody. This was such a treat. And
yeah, and he talked to us for a while, and the best part about it is I didn't have to do anything because Jason's here living out his childhood dream, driving the whole time, really. You did great. You did great.
Hey, it was all Evan. That's all I have to say. But anyway, guys, enjoy this, and it's a real treat.
See you on the other side.
Excellent! I'm a cog in the Bill and Ted universe, you know what I mean? I just tried to do my best by the comic and by the readers and the characters and, add some fun stuff to it. But, it's not canon, and I'm just really, for a while I was kind of, I still haven't seen the first movie, but I'm super fond of of Bill and Ted in a way that I didn't know I was until I was asked to do more stories, and we weren't able to come to do it, do a sequel to the comics. So I realized I really was fond of the comic stuff and the fans. And I always, the fans were great. Kids would always write in and they didn't know who made the comics. It was very real to them. They wrote to Bill and Ted. But it's just really funny that, oh God, what is it? 30 years later almost. And people are still reading the comics is really nice.
Yeah, it's great. So let me just start off by asking you, how did you get approached to do the adaptation for Bogus Journey?
In 91, I guess that started up. The industry was going through a lot of changes. And I'll try to keep this short and not sweet because it's boring publishing stuff. But Marvel was definitely changing as a company. So was DC. Adaptations of movies were still something that the companies were doing regularly. Star Wars and Dune and odd things like that. And that was something that was getting phased out. Those as the direct market got more, oriented in a certain way, and the independent market was starting to grow, from the late 70s, when we had, people could do black and white oddball books, people who weren't necessarily the most talented like myself at the time. I was doing this book called Pirate Corps, which became a book called Hectic Planet. And as Fabian Nicieza, the editor on Bill and Ted, said, he knew that I did this book with jokes in it and a lot of bands nobody has ever heard of. And he just figured be a good pick for Bill and Ted because I was doing a kind of science fiction humor book with a lot of gags, and at the same time, nobody really wanted this job. It's true. I mean,
Wow.
this is not a knock on Bill and Ted.
No, of course.
When people go, growing up, the jobs I wanted in comics, well, this changed a lot. But the jobs I wanted my goal was I was hoping to just do some Spider-Man fill-ins, you know? They don't even have fill-ins anymore, you know? I just wanted to do Marvel Comics, and that meant Marvel superheroes. I never in a million years thought, yeah, I'm going to grow up to do Marvel adaptations of movies. Nobody ever thinks that. Generally, the people who get movie adaptations were really young people like me who needed work and, you know, weren't going to say no, or older artists who were on their way out, to be honest, and they would try to give them work for their years of service, or just try to get them something and get these books done. But generally, adaptations are seen as a not a great gig.
Well, was there any like sense that, okay, if I do this, I'm paying my dues a little bit, or was it just I'm gonna take this job and like pay the rent for a month?
Yeah. Well, that was the first thing. I mean, the thing was, it was a job. I felt that my abilities were limited at the time, but I wasn't as I can't say that I was super confident, but I wasn't super negative and super stressed about my work like I am for the last 25 years, maybe. Because the connection wasn't that you do this and then people see it and they judge you. The connection was, I'm doing these pages and they'll be printed and we'll hopefully make a good book. Once I realized people were reading these things is when I kind of had a heart attack. But on Bill and Ted, I really needed the work. I was not full-time in the industry. And I guess the second half of getting this job was I had some independent black and white comic book work out there. But the reason that I've met people in the industry wasn't because of my comics work, but because I worked in a comic shop. And in 1988, it might have been, I had no book. My book Pirate Corps was canceled. I had no work really in the industry. I was still working practically full time at a comic shop. And in '87, I did my first San Diego convention to promote Pirate Corps. The following year, I was kind of grandfathered into a table, even though I had no work. They let me have a table in Artist Alley for free. Very
Nice.
different convention. Yeah, conventions were very different. And San Diego was much smaller. While at San Diego, I was there with. I got the plane fare from Jim Hanley, my boss. He took a bunch of us from Jim Hanley's Universe, the comic shop on Staten Island, and he took us for the what do they call them? The damn things. Basically for the marketing stuff, the retail meetings and conferences before the convention. Mm-hmm. The rest of the convention was just a treat. I got to sit at the table. So he paid for hotel and everything. So while there, we had a meeting with Marvel marketing people. Fabian was in marketing and sales at the time. I'm not sure of his exact title. And basically, I got Bill and Ted because I was entertaining enough at this dinner, drunk off my ass. Enough of my jokes landed. And between that and the fact that I was making some comic books that had, it was all punk bands and stuff like that. But Fabian became editor of I don't know if it was the Star line, which was basically Harvey Comics type material.
Right.
But he got all these ampersand books, what we call them. He got Bill and Ted, he got Kid and Play, he got Red and Stimpy. Red and Stimpy was the only successful book out of the bunch. That was Dan Slott, I believe, early on. Dan was always running up and down the Marvel corridors looking for work. And he eventually got it. But we were doing all these like kind of considered by everyone else bum books. They were kids' books, which was like a no, doing comics for kids was like some sort of thing you had to apologize. I love kids' comics, I still do. But it was the dregs, you know what I mean? We were definitely at the children's table. Mm-hmm. Nobody was going to be writing about these comics in the Buyer's Guide or the Journal or any of the conventions. Nobody was going to be booking you because of your comic book work on Kid and Play and Heathcliff. But it was a job. Well, that's my long answer. It was a confluence of things and getting drunk.
Well, I will respond to that with two personal statements. One, I still own my entire run of the initial run that you did, including the the original adaptation, and then all of the ones that came out. I've still got those mint in box. And then 2, I will say, just rereading, Kelly and I both reread the run in preparation for this, and I was struck by how much, this might be way off base for you, but how much comics like Scott Pilgrim were influenced by what seemed to be influenced by what you were doing back then, especially in the Bill and Ted stuff. The way you snuck things into the corners, little signifiers for culture, I've not seen done that well. Like, those 2 places are where I've seen them done that well. So
you'd have to ask Brian. Obviously, I know Brian is aware of my work, but it's probably the milk and cheese stuff that he was reading. But so I have 2 things to say. First, how old were you guys when this came out?
we were early teens, like almost. Yeah. So we're both awesome. We're both 40 now. So you were you were marketing directly into our brains. Like you were.
Fabian knew that. Fabian let me. My first assistant editor was Evan Skolnick, but Fabian really, he called the shots, and he let me get away with. I mean, we weren't doing anything horrible or crazy. We weren't trying to stick subliminal, dirty things or drug jokes into anything. But he let me really have my head, and we hardly got into any instances with Marvel or the Bill and Ted's people. I think it was Nelson Entertainment owned it at the time. Mm-hmm. But he really just let me run with it. And I have a feeling he let everybody basically have their head on the books, because the thing is, the bad thing is the books didn't matter. Marvel, everybody knew they were getting canceled with 12 issues, if not a shorter run. They knew that these books were not going to have legs, except I think Ren and Stimpy kept going. And that had a very strong license, and Dan was really, you know what I mean? He was putting his head in, he was putting himself into that book. I was putting myself into Bill and Ted. It makes a difference. I'm not saying that anybody did a crap job, but, Kid and Play was obviously a short-lived thing. Heathcliff, I don't know why the hell they thought Heathcliff would be. This is not Dell Comics or Gold Key of the 50s to the 70s. But the good thing about the books being, dead on arrival was that it didn't matter what we did. So he let me run fast and loose with everything and introduce a lot of things and have a good time. And they gave me all the mail from a lot of the kids, so I answered some of the fan mail personally on the side, and we got drawings. I still have drawings from this day the kids did, and I mean, it was an eye-opener to see what it was like to get fan mail, even though almost none of the fan mail was for me. So hearing, I mean, we knew we had readers, and we probably had numbers that weren't bad for today at all. That would be great for today as far as the direct market went. But we knew we weren't a hit or anything like that. But I also knew that it was the only book of mine that was probably ever going to be on a 7-Eleven or a Wawa spinner rack. I saw it there. And it was a great experience. And the whole thing was, I knew I was doing this comic mostly for kids, and they were the one, and they were responding to it. And we had so much fun working on the book. It was a real, except for the fact that I pushed a lot of the deadlines so that I didn't end up doing number 8 because I did a 3-part story. I don't know how I did a monthly book at all because I've never done one since.
Yeah,
during your 20s, you stay up all night and you can do that.
Right, I didn't realize that until I was reading the anthologies that my wife got me because I didn't want to open up my sealed copies. She got me the anthologies that were reprinted a few years ago, and I was I noticed that it was the collection. The second one was missing issue 8, and I was like, "Oh, that's weird. What happened there?" And then I did a little research. I'm like, "Oh, okay."
I only did the cover for that one. I think Tom Brevoort did that issue.
Nice. I might actually have to pull that one out at some point. But so after Bill and Ted, let's talk a little bit more about your take on Bill and Ted.
Sure.
What was neat to see with your run is they develop a little bit more of a personality. They have a little bit more openness with their cultural references, like they're big fans of the Planet of the Apes movies, stuff that never probably would have flown in the movies. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, it would never have flown in the movies because they would have probably had to pay for licensing.
Absolutely.
And back then, people were much less uptight. I did not get things pulled. I was putting band names. I was putting the names of small bands and national acts and, people on CBS records, people that were on SST records. And it wasn't just trying to – I just had no – I've never liked it when people referenced McDonald's and made it, Rick Monalds or McDonald's. Right. It just drives me up a goddamn wall. I mean, it's the real life. It's the real world. I'm clearly not. I've always tried to avoid that. Even as a kid, I couldn't stand it unless it was like a Mad parody or something. I couldn't stand it when people would make clear references to Star Trek, and it would be like, you know, it would be Bizarre World Star Trek. Just put Star Trek in there, for freak's sake. Now, I realize legally this can be an issue for a lot of things. When we did the Eltingville pilot for the Adult Swim, we had to clear everything. We had to get actually get signed contracts from people agreements saying that you can use likenesses of characters.
And do the BD Buck Wanna Dance thing, right?
Didn't have to do anything for saying something out loud.
Okay, all right, sorry.
But everything's visual in a comic book. But the thing was, the industry was looser back then. There were probably less lawyers, even though didn't feel like it. There were less lawyers on the earth back then, and nobody gave a crap. We never had anything. We had no problems, no complaints, except I think Grant Morrison,
which is shocking. Shocking.
The Scottish fanzine said something pointed about me that I won't say, just in case there are kids. And when we did a panel of him based on a PR campaign that DC Vertigo had of him, which was ludicrous and pretentious. So we just made a joke about that. But yeah, we made fun of everything, and I included real names because it grounded it in the way that the movies were, because I had the script for the Bogus Journey, and I had seen Bogus Journey after the adaptation, and you can see that after the adaptation, when we start the regular series, I just start playing around and adding characters and putting lots of references to things I liked. Mm-hmm. I was never not really a metal fan. I mean, there's bands like Black Sabbath that I like and whatnot, and I can listen to anything practically. I can listen to some black metal, I can listen to some death metal, but it just, you know, the hair bands that Bill and Ted were kind of, you know, into, you know, they had the guy from Faith No More in one of the movies and stuff, so I'd throw that stuff in, and then I had other characters in there, so I would just start throwing bands like Fishbone and you know, characters that I liked, and in the wedding issue I put Fishbone and the Chili Peppers, and it makes no sense, but I put the Residents playing as their wedding band.
Yeah, just great.
They had these weird references, and they had these appearances by people. You know, I mean, I haven't seen the first movie, but I know Fee Waybill from the Tubes is in it, and Jane Whelan. It plays
Joan of Arc.
Joan of Arc, because I went back to get all that reference to bring those characters in. I wanted to make the book a universe. The movies can't go as far as the comic because they don't have the time or the need. You can't, if you throw background jokes into a movie, nobody's going to necessarily see it. You have to make it a sight gag like Python or a Mel Brooks thing or Airplane. Mm-hmm. In a comic book, you can leave it in there and people can catch it on a second reading. That's all from Will Elder and Harvey Kurtzman from Mad. Growing up on that, that's what I when I was your age reading Bill and Ted, I was reading Mad comics that were reprinted in Mad Magazine,
right? Summer
specials, and I was really taken with Wally Wood and Bill Elder, who would just throw all this stuff into the background. Yeah. And I also grew up into Jack Kirby and George Perez superhero comics, and if a crowd of people came into a room and they said, "Look, there's a crowd of soldiers, you know, Hydra agents, or AIM," they drew everybody.
Yes.
So that I have always been a maximalist. If Bill and Ted are having a wedding, I'm going to do a 2-page spread of Mosh Pit. That's the entire, with all these knights and Huns and space creatures and death and everything.
I was going to mention those old Mad comics because your panels are just, they are so full. Like, I imagine you taking the time with one panel that some artists would take with an entire page. It's just crazy the amount of detail and information you have in there.
Yeah. I grew up on comics that were more packed, and I grew up on particular really liking those artists that I was talking about, and other artists who would really throw a lot of stuff in there. And also, part of it was always, I put a lot of work into the pages because of, it was like, overcompensating. I always felt that my artwork, especially at the time, was not very good. I never learned how to draw properly, and a lot of the stuff that I did is really kind of amateurish in Bill and Ted But if the energy, I've come to peace with it, and people have told me what they do like about it, and I've been able to stop apologizing about it at conventions. But the energy is there, and it didn't look like everything else, even though I was making a lot of fundamental drawing mistakes, and really, I did not know how to draw clothing very well, folds and noses and likenesses. Luckily, I wasn't asked to do likenesses of the two characters after they decided, after all, not to do likenesses.
Right.
So we have this approximation of them, and it was really tough. A lot of stuff I had to, it was harder to find reference back then. I had no mentor or anyone that I knew in the industry who would be able to point out, try this, try that, go here, get this book. But it's a fun, jerky series, and what I always my thing was that if I wasn't a good cook, and I maybe dropped the food on the floor once or twice, and I could at least cover it with as much sauce or gravy as possible to make up for it. And I've been trying to make up for it with as much sauce my whole career now. But in Bill and Ted's, I didn't quite have the composition and the line down, but it works. It's a fun comic, even if it's not it's not Bill Elder, let's put it that way, or Wally Woods.
But I think you captured the spirit really well, and all those references we were talking about it make it so rereadable.
It's a real pop culture conscious property, and the characters are just obviously so happy about everything.
Right.
They love their music. They love their friends. They love going to the movies. They love Star Trek. I was able to get that from the script, because there's all these references, and then when I saw the movie, they had the Star Trek Canyon, like the Gorn episode. You remember?
Yeah.
So we recognized that was something that I don't think was in the script. Also, there was a lot of parts of the comic that weren't in the movie, but it's clearly a pop culture. Death being the Bergman death from what was that, Seven?
The Seventh Seal.
Yeah, Seventh Seal. God, I'm going Seven Samurai, Seventh Sign, Seventh Victim, which is a great movie. I'm like, duh. But we didn't know he was supposed to be the Bergman death. We thought he was a skeleton. Weirdly enough, the toy that came out was also a skeleton. So it was kind of like I got my own action figure by accident.
Hey, well done. I had no idea that the action figure was the actual skeletal.
There was a lot less toys back then too. I don't have them, but I kind of would like the death, just as a joke. If something gets made of something that you wrote, and it's like there's these Predator action figures that are based on characters that me and Derek Thompson did for Bad Blood, and it's just so weird because we designed those. He designed this based on my scripts, and they're out there, and I can't even afford to have one of them. But it's really cool to see something get turned into a toy. So it was very funny that when those toys came out, it was a skeleton. I was like, what happened there? Because I know what happened with us. We were not given any reference material at the time, and they needed a cover.
Yeah.
So I drew Bill and Ted with Death. And I just drew him as a skeleton because I thought that's what death is, right?
Yeah. So, okay, let me ask you this. If you didn't have many references, you totally nailed Station. How did that work?
Oh, we started to they needed cover ahead of time for solicitation and things like that. And they also needed promotional artwork because back then they were less. They'd make these books that would have upcoming comics in them and whatnot. So for that and for Fight Man, which came out of Bill and Ted as a image.
I saw you did that. That's awesome.
Yeah, Marvel owned it, so we had to change him to Fight Dude in the collections, which is actually kind of better.
Right.
Bill and Ted.
Yeah, it's great.
But we had to do some promotional art off the bat, and so the first piece that I did was actually, I don't think we printed it in the Boom thing because I don't think we have any. We don't have it, but it was a more on target likeness drawing of Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter with a skeletal death. And I think I drew some characters from the Bill and Ted's poster or something, Napoleon, because we had no idea what was going to be in Bogus Journey. Mm-hmm. I took the job because it was another step to get out of working retail. Because, so I'm like, sure, I'll take this. So we didn't know what we were doing exactly because they just needed a poster, if you know what I'm saying, for retailers. And then they needed a cover. And by the time that we got the script, but by the time we got more material, we had the script. I had done something like 15 pages, and Death appears in those. And there was no way to go back. Marvel couldn't afford to scrap those pages, and the schedule was a nightmare on this because you're trying to coincide with the release of the movie. So you have that's another reason people probably don't want to do movie tie-ins. It's probably another reason why most of them look like hell, because you're given so little reference and so little time. But I was young, I was very hungry, I was very eager, and I had insomnia. So I just put I wanted every line of dialogue from that script and every scene in there. And I think they are in there, including the stuff that got cut from the movie ultimately, which is why the ending of the adaptation, we got letters like, why does the adaptation have this bizarre ending, this action sequence? I'm like, we didn't make it up. It got cut. I remember going to the movie with Fabian. We got tickets for the premiere in New York or a pre-release, and we both look at each other because the movie just cuts at one point, and the whole chase at the end with the van and the dream catchers and Bill's grandmother and everything. It was like a major part of the script, and I hated drawing it. It was going on.
It's funny. We've talked about that actually at length on the show, but something else.
There's still there's footage. Have you seen? Is there footage actually?
I have not seen the footage.
Yeah,
We've tried tracking it down. We've not seen it.
I don't think it's been released.
But
yeah, we had stills of the rabbits. The rabbit suit, the grandmother, and the general character. I forget it.
Colonel Oates.
Colonel Oates. Yeah.
God, how the hell did I remember that?
But what's so crazy is before I read your comic adaptation, I had bought the soundtrack for Bogus Journey because clearly both Kelly and I are huge Bill and Ted nerds. But I got this soundtrack on day and date of release, and at the end of it is this Steve Vai guitar solo called the Reaper Rap, and it's basically one of those 90s things where they put dialogue from the movie over a song. And toward the end of it is this dialogue from that chase scene. And it's like, Bill's like, kiss your fears, dude, offer him a honey bun or something. And after seeing the movie and hearing that, it's like, what is this from? Yeah. And then reading the comic.
I don't know why they cut the ending either. I have never heard. I mean, I'm sure it's probably on some, you guys will probably know better, but I don't know why they actually cut out what was like at least a good 5-minute or longer chunk of the film, and the film wasn't super long. I don't know if the effects didn't come off.
My suspicion is they were, they had changed it from Bill and Ted Go to Hell to Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, but the ending where evil robots just beat the crap out of Bill and Ted with the mic stands, crushing their skulls. That might have been a little dark for what the studio wanted to go for, target audience.
Was there a test audience maybe where that didn't work out?
But the sequence with where they get rid of their fears.
Yes, yeah.
There was nothing in there that I remember being.
No, that is weird that it's gone, because clearly
when you watch the film, I haven't seen it since it came out, but I remember because of working on the script, I remember it really does leave a hole in the film, because you feel like there's when a gun shows up, somebody's going to pull that trigger, and when these villains show up and they talk about the fears and everything, and it doesn't get closed, it feels, maybe I'm making more of it because I know what was supposed to happen, but it really feels like something is not there. It's weird.
It is, and I completely agree.
But it's a goofy film, so to be honest, it's not like people are going to miss it. So, I mean, it's a film where things happen. You know what I mean?
It is indeed.
Right. It's not a murder mystery, and it's not the who killed the chauffeur type of thing.
Can we transition a little bit here? I'd love to know how you got involved with Space Ghost Coast to Coast and the Adult Swim crew, and how that all transpired.
That seemed to be pretty early on for
97. I don't know. I remember Colonel Oates more than I remember the 90s. Space Ghost is really simple. It was just, again, it's funny. It's independent comics, small press comics, non-Marvel, DC, no Patriot, has gotten me most of my work. That does pay, but it never really pays on its own. So, I got Bill and Ted's because I was doing these books that had characters who were into music and were all slackers and kind of goofballs, except they were super negative. The thing about Bill and Ted, real quick, that is interesting to me, because I had to think about it while writing the introduction to the Boom edition, was that Bill and Ted are the only positive characters I've ever worked with in my life. They have families, they're adjusted, even if they're dinguses, but they're loving, they're caring, they're friends. I was going to play off that if I was able to write a sequel for Boom to the comics, which we had hoped could happen. I had figured out what happens to them, and I explain in some ways why they are so loving and positive in the world where they live with evil and whatnot. But my characters tend to be depressed and crazy and have no families and form bonds with other people out of necessity. Bill and Ted just like hugs everyone. They even hug their villains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, they give cake to the people in hell who have tried to kill them. Because they can't help but think nice things about people. They're very weird little characters.
Yeah, they'll win. Yeah, they win over their worst enemies. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And then I in the well, you might want if you want to talk about it later. I could tell you what their ultimate fate would have been. In the
no,
story.
let's do that now. Yeah. I need to know this now.
So, if you've read the run,
yes,
I brought in. I was like. The problem with Bill and Ted is, as you said, they are kind of ciphers. They really don't. They don't have emotional highs and lows. They can be sad and they can be happy, but they're never quite introspective or depressed or, you know what I mean? Even if they're upset because they think the girls hate them because the robots did something, they get excited like with a plan to make everything okay 2 seconds later.
Right.
I mean, they're cartoon characters in the world. It's a very cartoonish world. So I had to come up with a lot of characters. I mean, I want like some people of color, so they could have a bass player.
Yeah,
their band made no sense to me, so I got him a bass player. I tried to get him a neighborhood of friends, and I tried to keep. If you notice, I used every single character from both movies.
Yes,
and I gave them real roles. I would bring them back constantly because I figured I'm a fan of things. I know I like to see Scotty and Sulu and Uhura do stuff just like everybody else. So let's bring them back as much as possible. But I was running out of ideas really fast. So I had Thanatos, the death character. I had his coworkers show up, and that was War, Fate,
Nature,
Mother Nature, and Kronos, Time, which were who have all went senile.
Yeah,
and that became a big thing in the storyline. And I brought them back later on. Mother Nature ends up dating one of their dads, so he's like Mother Nature-in-law, stupid stuff. So what happened in this? So 20 years later, 25 years later, Boom asked me would I write a new series, and I was like, I really would. First of all, I could use the work because it's freelancing and it's always up and down. And second of all, I really realized I made my peace with the characters, and that I really was fond of this book. And I had an idea. The basic thing is, do you have an idea? So the idea was there was going to be another. Not an avatar, but another. Like in like the way death works in Hogfather and the Discworld books, these avatars of life forces, I guess.
Right.
I was going to add chaos. So chaos was awakening after 1,000 years or some shit like that. And, excuse me. And death and all those guys were terrified because they had heard bad things about chaos. Worse than Kronos going senile, you know what I mean?
Right.
Kronos is calm because Time Thumb and some of those people are running, time right now. And Kronos is basically, they're all like playing bingo or something. Chaos shows up and basically the whole world goes crazy. The whole world everybody starts getting crazier ideas. And it was going to play off certain things that were happening in the world. And all these fans of boy bands and K-pop bands and J-pop bands were going to start trying to kill Bill and Ted.
Oh, wow.
Trying to destroy.
That's awesome.
Music. It's a little different than what Dynamos was doing. They didn't hate, but they felt that like their brand of music needed to be stomped out so that so thousands of young girls and some boys would be chasing Bill and Ted everywhere they went. The whole world was out to kill them. The robots decided that they wanted to have families and start building more robots. All sorts of bad things start happening all over the world, and because chaos is coming. In the end, all the characters end up coming back. I mean, I have the whole, and it's this big universal thing, kind of bigger than the 3-issue series, where Bill and Ted basically have to face down chaos. And what happens is they discover in one of those dumb light shows that they always have in Magical Princess things. I mean, I like that stuff, but I hate how every movie now has a light beam happen at the end that solves everything.
The big blue hole in the sky.
It turns out that Bill and Ted are also cosmic avatars of love.
Oh,
because they love everyone, dude, and they their power as love is why they've never gotten hurt badly, why they haven't been really killed, why they're able to calm people down around them and make everybody basically end up starting the party. So they end up destroying. I mean, it's more complicated this, but they end up becoming love, and
It's beautiful.
That's perfect.
right, and they're spreading their love across the galaxy with their music. And the thing is, for them though, it's not really a job. They don't get anything. They have no benefits. Like when all is said and done, and they're like, all right, cool. So we're going to be like running love. We're going to be, but they don't have anything. They have to just go back to their house. So they have all the responsibilities of maintaining love throughout timelines and future, but they have absolutely no health benefits or help. So it would just end it on that these, Bill and Ted are actually cosmic entities, dudes.
That is perfect. I'm all in.
I really liked it. I wish I could have done it.
Oh man, that's
So that's the whole story. I don't think I've told it out yet, but that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is awesome.
So Space Ghost, it's just somebody sent Mike Lazo a copy of Milk and Cheese, the comic that I was doing for SLG, which is just super dopey, crazy, drunk, alcoholic.
It's great.
Culture referencing milk product, dairy product that hit people. It's better than it sounds, but it's just as stupid as it sounds, man.
In like most of the, was it the first 6 or 7 issues were issue number 1? Is that right?
Yeah, issue 7 was the second issue.
Okay. Yeah.
I was making.
Genius.
I always try to put an extra joke into anything, and I worked in stores, and I was very into, comic. I dealt with the industry, so I was making fun of the practice of multiple number ones. So I had first number 1, second, third, fourth, fifth, 666, and second issue. It confused a lot of people, especially when we went into reprints. But so then we would have special unembossed, non-bagged reprinted, and we'd make fun of the reprint stuff and the gimmicks. But yeah, somebody sent that to Mike Lazo when they were working on season 1 of Space Ghost, and the show had not gelled completely because shows are always a little wobbly. Mm-hmm. The first season, you look at the first season of The Simpsons if you can, and it gets better. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then gets worse. But he was looking for somebody to do dialogue. He was looking for voices for Zorak and Moltar. Just to, he had them, but he was looking for. He liked the banter in Milk and Cheese, and he thought that would be good for Moltar and Zorak. And my wife and I worked on a script, and they hired us for a while.
Great.
So it's awesome. Not much. That was really it. Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
I don't know if we had done Superman Adventures at that time, but we almost worked on Freakazoid. That was almost our first series. But everybody pulled out as Freakazoid because Spielberg's company was pressuring them to make everything into a toy and changing it. It started off as a Batman animated series, but funny. It would be half-hour adventures, kind of Plastic Man-like, it sounds like, but with a character that was spouting off a lot of references to pop culture and whatnot. And it went from, and we were hired, and I was actually starting a script for that. And then it became kind of like Tiny Toons for superheroes. And a lot of the people who were producing it and designing it and whatnot left as production people. Some of them freelanced, Paul Dini freelanced and wrote stories, but they were all kind of like ticked off of the direction. So they left staff. So that wasn't my job. But when Superman got started up, we got called to do that. And so we were doing those around at the same time. But I don't think we did Superman before Space Ghost. That might have been the first cartoon writing we did. But yeah, it was pretty weird and simple to get that call. And the funny thing is, we had just seen Space Ghost, and I said, "Man, wouldn't it be cool to write for that?" And that was all right.
That's awesome. How did you get involved with Shin-Chan?
That was also because of the Adult Swim. We had. I think that's the last thing we did that was for the Adult Swim, and we were already not doing anything for them. I had worked on another pilot. Sarah and I had worked on another pilot post Eltingville with some of the characters from Eltingville that they owned, the kid characters. And make a long story short, it was a time where I was feeling very unconfident about my work, and I basically 86'd the pilot because of my inability to make decisions. It's a really bad situation. But I guess they didn't completely, hate me. They never hated Sarah, of course, but was because when they were going to do Shinchan, they said that they wanted some people who had worked with them before to work on punching up the scripts, and they suggested us. I really did not like working on that show. It was not fun, and it ended. I dragged my heels in the last two scripts. They didn't really want to give the characters any kind of separate voices. We put a lot of work into the punch-up scripts, and they just really wanted everybody to just yell dick jokes at each other with the same voice in each character. I mean, some of it was funny. I liked Action Bastard. That was fun to do, but we were fans of the original anime, the character, and the manga. So it was weird to see it turned into, it was kind of like too much of a kid's show for Adult Swim, but too adult for a kid's show.
Right. Like watching Muppet Babies with dick jokes. Almost.
Well, the dick jokes weren't really in the original. They just they kind of did a What's Up Tiger Lily to a lot of it. They really kind of just made up new stuff. And I actually think Shin-Chan's a cool show, but it's not a hip show maybe. But because he was always dropping in trousers and making the elephant thing with his scrotum and his dick, I guess that's the direction they took it in. It was destined to burn out like it did, though, because if you've got no substance in the show, all the dick, you know what I mean? Even if the dick jokes are good, even if it was just a lot of that show depended on Shin-Chan's voice is really famous in Japan, and it's kind of like losing that really. It's an indefinable kind of thing. Like, would Pikachu have been as successful with a different voice? Yeah. Probably. But you know what I mean? You can't picture it. Right. You can't picture Bart Simpson's voice differently or Homer's or whatnot. But yeah, Shin-Chan, I personally think it was ill-conceived. Let's just make dick jokes over this stupid Japanese show, which is actually a beloved show. Okay. But it was pretty amazing because we're reading it, and I'm like, I take everything very, very seriously. Even the stupidest concept. If you give me the work, I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to try to earn my keep and make it good as I see it. You know what I mean? First of all, script doctoring I find very difficult because you're basically trampling over other people's work. I find that very difficult to do, even if I don't like what I'm looking at. Hey, I know better. I just do not. This is why I guess I don't have a great animation career ever. But I don't want to have conflict. I've never liked writing rooms.
Yeah.
The few times I've been in a writing room, I just feel that tension of everybody's trying to be funnier than each other. And I have very nervous habits when I'm in a room and I don't know people. I start talking a lot, and not necessarily in like funny or I'll just start mumbling. I'm like the bad guy in the D&D game who shut up. And I realize I have my limitations in that way. I'm better at doing the work by myself or working with Sarah or another person, but a whole room, it's competition to me. So basically the idea of going, I think this joke is terrible, I'm going to rewrite it, it just makes me anxious. At the same time, I thought everything was terrible. The characters all had the same voice and approach. I mean, if you take characters in a comic book and you cover up the faces and you can read the dialogue and you can't tell if it's Iron Man or Batman or Harley Quinn, I think the writer's done a bad job of characterization. And you can do that in a lot of comics. You'll cover it up and everybody's making the same pop culture jokes or the same Game of Thrones joke, and you can't tell who anybody is unless they're definitely the Thing, you know what I mean? Right. Because they're chomping with their words off. But it's the same thing in live action or animation. Characters should, Marge does not speak like Bart, who does not speak like Milhouse, you know what I mean? They do a really, really good job of what that person's attitude is. And it's not just the sound, it's the way that they talk and their attitude. And this show was just flat. Everybody spoke the same, had the same characterization, and I was like, what are they expecting to have happen here? It's the kind of thing that's cool. Like, I mean, with Space Ghost, it's 15 minutes. It's 11 minutes. You know what I mean? Right. So if you're just shooting shit all over the walls,
It's going to be over soon.
That's fine. If you're going to actually make me sit in front of 22 minutes of characters week in, week out, if you want this to last more than 2 seasons, you better give me a reason to care or come back, because after a while, shit jokes are just, my friends, everybody's friends making better ones. You laugh more at the diner with your friends after a movie than you do at any show.
Yeah.
So you got to give people a reason to come back, and a lot of that is story and character. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of something like Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It didn't work for me, but but you know what I'm saying? Those characters were all different. They had different approaches, different fans, and they interact in a certain way. If you have 6 meatwads, you know what I mean?
That's not going to be a great show.
You're going to get
It's my worst nightmare.
right. If you think about a lot of successful shows, it's because they can go in a lot of different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And Shin-chan could only go in one direction. That was the toilet. Both literally. And, things happen, though. A few of I don't know. We didn't watch all of them, but I know some of our jokes got in. But again, I just found the producers unresponsive, and I guess they could also tell that I just did not care. I was giving up by like the 5th one. I couldn't. It was like pulling teeth. Anyway, that's more than you probably wanted to hear.
No, this is all incredibly interesting. I saw Shin-chan on your Wikipedia page, and I was like, holy shit, Evan Dorkin worked on that.
That was a weird one too, because we were really excited because we like the Japanese Shin-chan. So, but it just was like. It was just a lot of guys giggling in a room somewhere in Texas, and then we got sent that. And we were like, yeah, okay. They're probably all very successful right now.
Well, then one more just random...
whatever you want to talk about. I don't have to pick up my family until 10.
Yo Gabba Gabba. How did you get involved with Yo Gabba Gabba?
That was the Aquabats. My friend Paul got me into the Aquabats, and I was like, where's this band been my entire life?
Nice.
Because I was always a fan of a lot of the things that the Aquabats are all about in their music and in the pop culture they like, and the Japanese, the kaiju and the tokusatsu and the Sentai shows and old Batman TV show and things like that. I mean, it's just really ridiculous. And I was like, a band that's a bunch of kind of semi-inept superheroes who are really kind of Bill and Ted in their outlook,
Yeah.
Very friendly, very cool, very positive, very welcoming. But they're at these punk shows with these wild bands. They're out there with these crazy bands who are like bleeding on the stage, and they're fighting guys in monster costumes, and no foul language and all that stuff. It's pretty, and the music was great. It was ska and punk and new wave and surf and rockabilly and everything. I like the kitchen sink approach. It's just like my work. We saw them. Oh God, the professor was still in the band. We saw them at a show in the city, and I really loved it. And they pointed out to us. They pointed out, the back commander pointed at us, going, "Hey, there's old people at the show," which was great. I'm not that much older than some of the Aquabats, but wow. And after the show, I got up the nerve to introduce myself to them, and it turned out that some of them, Christian, the Bat Commander, and the Professor, and they knew of us. They knew our comics and stuff, and we stayed in it. Sent letters back and forth once in a while. After that, I got a picture of me looking really nervous and geeky around them because I get like that around. And when the Eldingville pilot. For the Adult Swim, we were starting to do stuff for Batman Beyond, but we got the chance to do the Eldingville pilot, so we only ended up doing one episode to move on to that. And the Adult Swim really gave us, I mean, with Space Ghost, this is the thing that I like. We work on things that aren't important. They don't matter in the long run, you know what I mean? We don't work on Star Wars, we don't work on Spider-Man or Batman. But we ended up working on a bunch of things where people really they really trusted the writers and the designers and everyone. Like Space Ghost was like that. Yo Gabba Gabba was like that. Bill and Ted was like that at Marvel. And on this, we were producing the show, and they let us do everything. So for good or for bad, if you don't like the pilot, it's largely up to me in a lot of ways. But we hired the Aquabats to do the music for the opening and closing credits. We just wanted to get people that my friend Steven DiStefano, who's an animation professional in comics, he did the storyboards. I got a DJ from WFMU who I like. I thought would be good for one of the voices. I never understood why people don't hire people that they're supposedly fans of, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of people do. A lot of people do, but it's amazing how many times you'll have somebody, go, hey, I'm working on this show, and we love your stuff, and we'd love to talk to you about doing something, and, cricket noises, and that happens a lot. And part of it is because people are being nice or awkward, and they say some nice things, but it's amazing when somebody actually calls you up and says, hey, we'd like you to do something for us. And that's what happened on Yo Gabba Gabba. Christian called me and Sarah up, and it was a small part of the show. We were just doing he was like, one of the things that they were doing on Christian and his partner were doing on Yo Gabba Gabba was calling in all the people who had been good to them. Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo, they hired him because they had a running joke that whoever got a show first, Aquabats or Devo, they'd hire. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's awesome.
A lot of people on that show that are friends and family, and bands that they like, and designers and artists and writers that they liked. And that was you look at those cartoons, and there was not a huge budget on that stuff. There was so much creativity on that show. It was such a happy experience. My only unhappiness is that we were never able to go to LA and actually visit. And our daughter was invited to do a dancey dance, and she was the right age. She was like 3. And we could not afford 3 trips. You know what I mean? The trip to LA to just do dancey dance. I wish that we could, but so we got hired to do Super Martian Robot Girl's costume design.
Nice.
And to design the comic book covers for the comic. If you remember, the Yo Gabba Gabba cast would be reading a Super Martian Robot Girl comic, and then they'd start the Super Martian Robot Girl segment. Originally, it was Super Martian Ghost Robot Girl. It was insane. And what happened was, so we designed this costume, and I made the cover, and I based the back cover. The cover was based on some stuff from the Electric Company comic that Marvel did, and the you can't see it because I have DJ Lance Rock reading it like easy reader, and he says, this is. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember here off the top of my bat. All the pop culture stuff I grew up on goes back into the work too. Everybody influences everybody, and what happened was they were live action sequences with Super Martian Robot Girl. They made the costume based on the design Sarah and I did. And we worked together, and we had a lot of back and forth on that costume because it was just you get to design a superhero kid girl for a TV show. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but we wanted it to be really cool, And what happened was the Nickelodeon did not like the live action sequences. They had shot most of them for these short things, and they were done like the Spider-Man segments from Electric Company, if you've ever seen those.
Yes.
And they didn't like the way that they came out. So they had to fill these empty slots in the running time and fix Super Martian Robot Girl on a very tight schedule. So what happened was they called us up, Christian called us up and said, would you guys want to do Flash animation? Would you design these as Flash animation? And it was, we were adapting the live action for the first 5 or so.
Wow.
Basically, there was somebody in a crazy costume, as a giant shrimp that was stealing from kids and people, and all the actors. So we sat there and started drawing up cartoon characters for them to animate, and they I think we storyboarded the first one, but the animators, I wish I could remember their names offhand, and I apologize. We didn't animate them, but we basically art directed the first couple, and then after that we would design all the characters, and the animation director would board them and use our arc. So I did have an animation background. That's what I studied in college, where I actually was in a class with Alex Winter, by the way, a screenwriting class with Alex. I think we had 2 words together, and one was "huh" and one was "thanks," because I opened the door for him and held it for him.
It's very nice of you. Very nice.
Yeah, well, but we were in one class together, and I don't think I would have remembered him if I didn't have to draw him as character. Now, of course, it's like, and I don't think I think he knows who I am now, but he didn't at all. You know what I mean? And Only because people will put him in Twitter conversations about Bill and Ted that I'm in, and I'm super embarrassed when people do that. And I'm just like, I gotta go now. I'm like, I'm not trying to shove myself into your, I didn't make these movies. But so basically, long story short, we ended up art directing and designing all the Super Martian Robot Girl cartoons, which was an insane job because we were drawing full-size bodies, and then we'd be drawing face movements, all the vowel movements, arms, you know what I mean? We were doing the limited animation art, but we were doing all that art, and we had to do it fast. And Sarah was color coordinating everything, and it was really, really cool. And after that, they asked us if we wanted to do a Storytime script, and we did. And then they asked us if we wanted to do a Storytime cartoon on our own with an animation company. So we did. And the next thing we know, we're writing episodes of the show.
That's great.
Co-writing with Christian, and Sarah co-wrote one with him on her own. But my name got stuck on the credits, so, and then, we ended up doing another Super Martian Robot Girl all by ourselves. And it was just, that was the best. That was the best. That was the most exciting thing I think that I feel like we've been involved with TV-wise. It was just great.
That is,
and it had that element of Space Ghost and other things where Eltingville, where basically, I remember I asked Christian something, and he just says, "Because I trust you guys." That was the way things were done. They hired you for a reason. They wanted people to have fun. They wanted people to have their, input. And I was just like, "Should we do that?" And he goes, "You do what you want. I trust you guys." And that's why there's so many varieties of approaches in that show. And the kinds of people and backgrounds and everything. I love that show.
Yeah. You know how kids go through phases with different TV shows and they won't stop watching a thing.
Sure.
The phase where my daughter went through the Yo Gabba Gabba phase was one of the most relaxing in my life because what had to be on the television at that point was not. I mean, it was actual quality. It wasn't just trash.
For a kids show, because also kids like repetition.
Yes.
Which some shows play towards, I mean, Teletubbies had us, would literally repeat certain sections on purpose.
Yeah.
But the two reactions that we got from Yo Gabba Gabba, basically, and we were a small part of it, but we were responsible for a little bit of it, was some parents clearly, if they weren't into the music, hated it. It was a noise and color onslaught. These are often the same. Well, actually, everybody thought everybody on the show was on drugs. The same thing with Space Ghost. For some reason, and I'm like, man, Yo Gabba Gabba is probably one of the cleanest shows on the planet. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's just, it's imagination, I'm sure, I can't speak for everybody, but no, the creators, the people behind Yo Gabba Gabba was certainly not on drugs, but It's amazing how many people. I think a lot of people who made that argument either were really annoyed by it or were on drugs while watching it. And those are the teenagers and adults who were surprised to see like Cornelius doing thrash music on a kids show. And that's the other reaction we got from it. People who were like couldn't believe that they were watching Devo and all these bands, and that one of the guys from Operation Ivy is doing the voice of a cactus, and the lead singer for Rocket from the Crypt and the Night Marchers is introducing bands as the Swami, his record label. It was a really, and I loved it because I'm an animation fan and I love and pop culture fan, and it was like this is what to me people who always like are nostalgic about HR Puffin stuff and things like that. They're impossible to watch. They're not very good. I like looking at a lot of the stuff on the set, but they're treacly.
Yes.
And Yo Gabba Gabba was pretty knowing and pretty hip, and I can get why it might drive some parents crazy or people, but it was a show you could watch with your kids, especially if you did like the bands and especially if you were into certain aspects of pop culture. Every show had different stuff going on in it. Biz Markie, man. You get Biz Markie,
right.
Then you get, a band that you really like, and then you get some amazing dancing and cartoons and monster suits and, ska songs. I'm there.
All in, man. All in.
Yeah. Now I'm depressed. I miss it.
I mean, yeah, that was great, right?
Unbelievable.
We also have to say, Evan Dorkin, probably the most celebrated and awarded guy or person that we have interviewed. He's actually won several Eisner Awards and a Harvey Award. I mean, we've talked to people that have been nominated for Oscars, people nominated for Emmys. This is a big time award winner. Man, Evan Dorkin, that was. I'm going to shut up now. Anyway, thank you so much, Evan, for speaking with us. That was incredible.
Appreciate all the time you gave us. I don't know what else to say after that. How about, thank you to We Own This Town and Michael Eads for producing this podcast.
Scott Bricklin and Scooby Tunes music for our excellent theme song, Walk Away.
And JT, be excellent to each other.
Party on, dudes!
You have a naturally weak signal in your voice, my friend.
I do. It's true. Jason Dimas. That's perfect. I'll take that all the time.